Today, we delve into the Philippine housing sector's latest developments, including policy shifts and industry responses. Joining us is Mr. Arnold Choa, First Vice President of the Subdivision and Housing Developers Association, or SHDA, to provide insights into these pressing issues. Mr. Choa, welcome to Follow the Money. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Arnold, it's great to be able to touch base with SHDA. I feel like there's a lot of things going on there. But perhaps before we get into a lot of the pressing issues, would you give us an idea as to maybe some of the trends or some of the changes that have been happening in the housing and subdivision market in the past few years, especially after the pandemic, and maybe how SHDA has been instrumental in growing the market?
Okay. So when we started off with the pandemic, it was a very big shift. And so SHDA, or SHDA, SHDA we call it, was very instrumental in doing both the policy shifts as well as policy changes, because right before the pandemic is the time that we were able to have our own department. The Department of Human Settlement and Urban Development started off 2019, right at the cusp, right before pandemic. And so what shifts or what trends we're seeing right now? Currently, I like talking about things in threes. Mm-hmm. So what happened is during the pandemic, everyone was hit. Everyone was in their homes. Construction actually stopped for a while because of health issues, of health concerns. Mm-hmm. And so we've had a lot of people dig into their savings to actually survive then. And so that was during the pandemic. Right after the pandemic, up until last year, people were starting to save, starting to build out savings, looking for jobs outside when they were coming from OFWs who came back. They have now ventured outside again, and they are working towards gaining enough for their life. And then right now, we've actually seen an uptick of people going back into housing.
Mm-hmm. Buying properties.
Buying properties.
Right. So the first year, no money. The second year, they're just buying properties, but failing to really be able to, complete the payments.
Yes.
And then on the third year, it's really about, trying to buy another property, buy a property and finally complete it. So it's only now that the property developers are actually starting to make money after the pandemic on the fifth year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we're building more.
We're building more, mm-hmm. Yes. So some people have actually ventured outside of Metro Manila already. Mm-hmm. So people have been looking towards the north, towards Bulacan, Pampanga, and also in the south, towards Cavite, as well as Visayas and Mindanao. So we actually see a lot of people go into Cebu, not only Cebu, but also in the vicinity of Cebu, because they're actually growing as a city. I actually visited Palawan, which actually is restarting their their housing, because it's only now that tourism came back. And Davao, we're also hearing people of coming back into trying to go into housing.
Okay, so people are venturing outside of Metro Manila, outside of the city centers, and more, what kind of developments are they looking for? Is it in terms of size, in terms of themes? What might they be looking for?
So it really depends on where in the journey the
buyer might be?
Not actually the buyer, the community is.
Oh, okay.
So if your community is a bit smaller, if you're looking at in not so much a city yet, you would still see people look more into horizontal housing. Mm. And then once you get into places that are starting to pick up, starting to urbanize, that's where you get the vertical and condominiums coming in.
Right. Is there like an average amount of money that people are willing to spend for a property in subdivisions, of course?
In subdivisions, that's a very good question. But I may not have a satisfactory answer for that. just because if we're talking about the Philippines, we're 7,000 plus islands.
Right.
So I can't really give an exact average. We actually have multiple different averages or multiple different typical salaries people have per region. So
Right.
if we're looking at, let's say, right outside Metro Manila for a subdivision, you may typically see maybe you can reach around 3.5, a bit lower, 2 to 3
For a house and
for
lot,
for a house and lot.
that's
And
about
then
100 square meters, thereabouts.
it'll be around 100 square meters if you have both floors on it.
All right. All right. So perhaps one of the things that has gained our attention in media is that there seems to be a lot of scams that people are complaining about. People want to save. People want to buy their house and lot, but they don't know whether they can trust the particular developer. This work that SHDA or SHDA has with the Department of Human Settlements and has that resulted in any kind of framework or protections against scamming or like any mechanisms that would help the home buyers?
Okay. So actually in SHDA, so one of the things that we actually like looking to, we want to look at whenever we induct new members, if they have any questions if developers have questions of what to do, we want to see that they actually have licenses to sell, that they have permits in place, that they are they are by and large wanting to complete this project. And so at SHDA, we have that as a standard. So I can tell you, at least inside SHDA, we don't have the real estate scams usually.
So this membership, for example,
Yes.
in SHDA or any like property organization, does that help filter out the scammer organizations against, from those who are not? And then perhaps if you're an OFW or, an Filipino expat, what do you look for? What else do you look for to make sure that you are sending people money to legit property organizations?
Okay. First and foremost, if I were abroad, first and foremost, this is real property. It being real, I would suggest having someone especially for OFW, be it brother, sister, cousin, aunt, uncle, have them go to the property, actually inspect it, look into licenses to sell, look into promises. It used to be called HLU or B numbers. Now it's called DSUD numbers.
Right.
Sometimes you'd see the old HLU or B numbers if you're especially looking at old properties. As for SHDA, we actually just keep in track with who's actually in our membership. We go into contact with DSUD, DHSUD. If they have any trouble, we contact with them regularly of trying to self-police our organizations.
Now, from the perspective of the country, on a macro level, we have a housing problem here in the Philippines. In your experience or in your talks with the government, how big is this housing backlog that we have? And how is SHDA and its members helping to clear that backlog?
Okay. So the last figure that I remember being reported would be 6 million. Okay, that was the backlog that was announced. Currently, what we're doing as SHDA, we're talking with both the government, both either DHSUD as well as other key agencies such as NEDA, such as ARTA, to both simplify and ease the efficiency to go through the permitting process, because you actually have to collect around above 100 signatures just to finish your permitting process. That takes way long. That takes way too long. And if you want more housing to be built, we have to simplify and make our development processes efficient.
How long does it normally take, and what is the target now in your discussions with government and the agencies?
Target for signatures,
Yeah, for
years.
how long? Yeah.
So right now, what we're targeting, hopefully, is less than 2 years. It reaches more than that just because of a lot of agencies that we still have to go talk with.
Understood. And you were saying that the typical cycle for building subdivision is about 7 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was the number average we had pre-pandemic. Now we're not quite. Now we're seeing it a bit longer just because of the pandemic issue, and it may or may not just revert back.
Mm-hmm. And because of all these issues that you want to iron out with government, SHDA is looking at a unified Philippine housing roadmap. That's for 2025 to 2040. What does that look like? What kind of points would have to be important in a unified roadmap for housing?
So this is actually the second in a series. We actually had a roadmap for right before it, up until 2024. That roadmap was actually more internal to the private industry. That one is what can we do inside the real estate industry to make housing better, to actually try to cover the needs of the Philippine nation. Now, the theme of the next one, which is 2025 to 2040, is actually what can we do as a system. So we've done private industry. The next one, the theme is for government or our key players. So what can we do as a whole, as a housing industry, both private and public? And one of the things that we look into that is how can we help actually sustain the 4PH program? How can we make it both practical for the developer as well as advantageous for the government? Another one that we look at is, again, the ease of doing business. And another one that we actually also look at is how to handle the price points, the affordability of it.
Right. On that context, the Philippine government had raised the housing price ceilings. Given the target market of the backlog in the 6 million, I imagine the majority of those are in the lower income household. How does SHDA or SHDA plan to ensure that housing remains affordable for the average Filipino?
Okay. So when we're talking about the average Filipino, we're actually looking at around the 5th to 6th decile. So there's actually 10 deciles for this. And one of the key things that we look at is, even though there's a price ceiling, that's a price ceiling. So that is the maximum, let's say, for socialized or economic housing that it can be set.
Yeah.
But inside the markets, when you're talking inside different regions, they can actually be set lower, depending on the appetite of the market. So let's say if you're in a region that can't do 2.5 million, then you actually see developers self-regulate or actually put their prices to match the market. And so one of the things that we actually want is that the price ceiling sometimes actually be adjusted higher, mostly because it's a ceiling, and if we're putting it for the national perspective, especially for NCR, you actually need above that to handle the demand of the markets.
All right. So let's be specific. Let's say in Metro Manila, the price ceiling is about 3.5 million for a property. Sorry?
That's for the VAT threshold.
VAT threshold.
Yes.
And right now, with the new price ceiling, how much would it be?
So currently, actually, the price ceiling, if I'm not mistaken, is 2.5. So it would be very hard to have a 2.5 million, let's say even a condo inside Metro Manila.
Right.
Yeah, that's why if you want to address that segment of the market in Metro Manila, you'd have to raise the price ceiling to actually match the costs of living here.
So if the price ceiling right now in other areas, outside Metro Manila, immediately outside, in the greater Manila
it's
area.
a blanket. It's a blanket throughout the country.
Ah, okay. All right. So if,
That's the hard thing about averages.
Right.
We kind of lose the minutia of the region specifics.
right. So if I wanted a cheaper property, then I would have to really go outside
Yeah.
of Metro Manila. Okay, lots to talk more about housing in the Philippines, but we do have to pause for a few reminders. When we return, we'll discuss the implications of converting farmlands into subdivisions and SHDA's stance on this controversial issue. Stay on BNC and follow the money. Welcome back to Follow the Money. We're still with Arnold Choa, First Vice President of the Subdivision and Housing Developers Association, or SHDA. Okay, back to housing. Of course, you were saying that it takes not just public, investment into the sector, but also private ones. You're working with public-private partnerships in making sure that we are able to address the housing backlog. How does that work in coordination with SHDA?
What's the question?
How do you implement a PPP project within the purview of SHDA, or how does SHDA contribute to the PPP projects to address housing?
SHDA as an organization actually doesn't have any PPPs. It's mostly our members who themselves go into PPPs with the government on their own volition.
So how does that look like? Because I remember there was a time in one of the government administrations that the developers, the big-time developers, are mandated to also create or develop a property or public housing for, let's say, the military, even as they build in Fort Bonifacio. Is there anything like that with SHDA?
So I believe that's not the public partnership, but that is actually the socialized housing compliance. Would that be what you're pertaining to?
Is that still mandatory?
So there is still a mandatory component of that. So for every, let's say, residential house that you build, there is a certain portion of money that you would still need to put aside. Well, back in the day, it is on the purview of the developers themselves to actually either build or source the building of socialized and economic housing, so that we don't always, because developers, we can't only just build, let's say, 10 million, 20 million condos all across the nation. We always have to think about the lower deciles. So that's still, that used to be us building it. Now it is, I believe, still being put into an escrow account.
Okay.
And then they're slowly unwinding that for a new program, actually.
Okay, but there's no monitoring that happens there. So it's still under the...
So the escrow account is actually put in with the government. So we give the government some funds into an escrow, and then they tell us about where we can deploy the funds, which socialized or whichever compliance project to put it in.
All right, that's actually interesting to look forward to, look into
So that's
later on.
yeah.
But perhaps a topic for another day. But in the meantime, another controversial issue, farmlands turning into subdivisions. Of course, that's been a topic even with the Senate. What is SHDA's position on that?
So I feel for DAR. So DAR is the Department of Agrarian Reform. They're actually the ones who, one of the departments that are mandated to actually look into the issues of how to convert agrarian land to either residential, commercial, or actually different uses. We hope that could be faster. So we're actually trying to get into talks with the DAR as well as with DHSUD as to how we can hasten that process, because we know DAR is flooded with requests, and it being part of their table, what can we do to help them? What can we do to make that processing faster? We're there to start that conversation and hopefully come out with a good resolution.
Like, how big is this market that we're talking about when it comes to farmlands being requested to be turned into subdivisions?
It is big enough that we have some constituents have 1 year, 2 year delays because of it.
Okay, so, but no work happens until DAR actually approves that request or that application. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Talk about applications. The DHSUD, of course, is processing over 1,000 housing applications nationwide under the 4PH program, 4PH program. Is SHDA or SHDA supporting these efforts to expedite these applications?
Yes.
How are you doing that?
Well, the hard thing is that that is part of the government's purview. If they have a lot of housing applications, we can. That's also coming from our members.
Okay.
So it's good to see that they're actually going through the projects and going through the applications. Now, what we're trying to do in SHED is actually look into, are there any other ways or any other mechanisms that we can utilize to actually provide that part of housing, be it through the 4PH, be it through other agencies, be it through the compliance mechanisms.
And are there at the moment? How do you push for DHSUD to go through the applications faster?
That one would be an internal process of DHSUD.
Okay. Regular meetings with them, do you?
So we do have regular meetings with them. We do touch base with a lot of them. But again, that part is not more for SHDA to handle, because we can't really, how you say this, you can't really
Force them. Yeah.
or actually, because the DHSED has to balance it out, right?
Of course,
Efficiency
of course.
and accuracy of it.
Lots of initiatives, lots of activities for SHDA. But on top of that, you still have other initiatives that you're working on to not only help the backlog in Philippine housing. Can you share with us some more, or rather more, of those initiatives?
Okay. So one of the initiatives that we're actually looking at, not only in the process of housing, but as actually in
Encouraging membership, or is it rallying?
So we also have some camaraderie for doing, how do you call this? Touching base with everyone. So one of the things that we actually have going on next week, actually, for March 27 is our Golf Cup. So our Golf Cup is not only just us playing golf, but also having the members touch base from all over the country to come together, talk about what issues they have, because it's not only the national level that we see the issues, but in location specifics. So we actually have regions, we touch base with everyone, and that Golf Cup's going to be happening at Wakwak Country Golf Club.
And we know that greater dialogue among the members will actually also help make sure that you're all aligned when it comes to, the national issues and industry-specific issues. Perhaps this is the last question, and I hope you don't mind if we turn personal a little bit. Maybe a light off-the-cuff question, real talk here. We're talking about Bahay goals. If you had to describe the Filipino dream house, based on your experience or based on studies that you've conducted, what would a Filipino dream home look like? Perhaps in 3 words.
I can't give it to you in 3 words, but I
Okay.
can give you my perspective.
Okay.
So we actually have two different perspectives to look here. So we have the older generation, which tend to like their houses a bit bigger, their houses to have all their families nearby, and to have them be actually where they grew up. So we actually had people in that generation go look into if they grew up, let's say, in Pampanga, even though they work all the way in Metro Manila, they still want their house in Pampanga. We also have the current generation who are a bit more freer where they want to see. So they actually tend to look at smaller houses because they're still up and coming. They are very sensitive to price points and they're very sensitive to what is actually available to them, their amenities, their community, what's nearby.
All right. So those two trends that you're looking at, one is more sentimental, perhaps the other one more all about access.
Yes.
Is that correct? All right. Arnold Choa, First Vice President of the Subdivision and Housing Developers Association, or SHDA, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
And updating us on the housing industry in the Philippines. We appreciate it. Now, SHDA's proactive measures and collaboration with government agencies and the private sector aim to address the housing backlog while promoting sustainable and affordable housing solutions for every Filipino. That is it for today's edition of Follow the Money. I'm Raine Musñgi. Thank you so much for watching. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel, always on top.